guys know me pretty well, you know that I'm a pretty big car enthusiast, so for me, the 2014 Mazda Miata doesn't need an introduction. I know this car pretty well. It's one of the few cars that I would personally get as my weekend toy car. However, for a lot of people, they may have actually forgotten this car. Mazda actually hasn't done much in terms of changes for the Miata the last few years. In fact, this 2014 model that I'm sitting in represents basically the last model year of the third generation Miata. Now, 2014 actually marks the 25th anniversary of this vehicle. Mazda did release a special 25th anniversary model at the New York Auto Show earlier this year. However, Mazda is getting ready to introduce an all-new fourth generation that'll be based on the Skyactiv platform. It'll get the Kodo design language. This one, however, has been out since 2006, and Mazda, again, hasn't done anything really to the vehicle in terms of changes. The front end of the car got a refreshed look in 2009, complete with that smiley-looking front end. You have to remember, in 2006, Mazda was still building the first generation Mazda 3. Now the vehicle has moved on to its third generation, so the design of this car is very, very old, and it certainly feels that way. Looking at the front of the car, it's kind of got a cutesy look to it. It's not really much in terms of aggression, which is probably why this car has gotten a reputation for being a chick car, putting that in quotes. But, you know, among enthusiasts, they know that when you get this car with a manual transmission, with the sport package and stuff like that, the suspension package, it makes for a pretty satisfying track car. However, for most of the majority of the public, they kind of just view this car as a very small, tight roadster that a lot of women are going to drive. So looking at the side profile of the vehicle, the Miata is very, very tiny. This thing's about 157 inches in overall length, about a 97-inch long wheelbase. This thing is smaller than most of the subcompact cars on the market. Looking at the back of the vehicle, again, that cutesy look is kind of followed through with taillights that mimic the front headlights. I do like the dual exhaust tips, and then the little silver painted trim that goes along the headrest looks pretty nice. I mean, overall, it's not really much in terms of aggression. It has the classic proportions of a British roadster, which is what made the Miata really popular back in 1989 when they first brought this car here. It was an alternative to the dying and unreliable British roadster. And this was a Japanese vehicle that was reliable, easy to drive, very comfortable to drive, and it was just kind of your toy car that was very cheap to purchase and cheap to run. Now, the Miata still comes in 3 trims. You can choose between the base sport, the mid-level club trim, which is what I would choose for myself, and then what I'm sitting in is the Grand Touring. The Grand Touring rolls in things like leather, heated seats, Bose audio. My particular one has the premium package that has the HID headlights and the intelligent access key. I mean, this is kind of more of a simple car for me, which is why I'm a little perplexed. My tester actually has the power retractable hardtop. That was actually introduced in 2007. It's a very nice hardtop, don't get me wrong. It makes this car a lot more secured versus just the conventional soft top. And actually, in terms of the weight penalty, this thing still weighs about 2,500 pounds, and the hardtop actually only adds about 70 pounds worth of weight. But for me, the Miata is known as a simple, pure car, and I really think that I'm hoping that the next generation model will kind of follow in that footsteps, which I'm pretty sure it will. Mazda says that the next generation Miata, which will actually be introduced in the in September 3rd of this year, will be about 250 pounds lighter. That's the rumors that have been going around. The interior of the 2014 Miata pretty much carries on the theme of simplicity. It's also very, very dated. It basically takes you back in time, back into the mid-2000 range in terms of interior quality and technology features. Now, the Miata is a very, very low car. I had the Corvette as the other convertible earlier this last month. This thing is pretty much just as low, so when you want to get into the car, you really do need to fall into the vehicle. So if you don't like sitting basically on the ground, this is not the car for you. Now, I can already tell the way the door sounds when it shuts. This structure isn't as stiff as a lot of other, more modern sports cars, so it's definitely in need of a redesign. But here's the key for the vehicle. I do have the intelligent access key because I have the premium package on the Grand Touring model. Now, because this vehicle is so old, there's actually no push-button start here. What you have to do is turn this little pacifier thing here. I actually haven't seen one of these since the 05 RL, but turn that. The gauges, they kind of do a little bit of a little hop to wake up. But of course, basically you're turning a key here. And then what you're hearing is the conventional 2-liter MZR motor. This is basically the same engine that you're going to find in the previous generation Mazda 3. You know, for the Mazda Miata, they actually do tune the engine a little bit more, and it makes a little bit more power, and it has a nice little induction and an exhaust noise. Now, unfortunately, I do have the 6-speed automatic transmission. I am sad that I couldn't get one with a stick. However, I do have a video up of a stick of a 2012 Sport with a 5-speed. The upper trims, the Grand Touring and the Club, will have the 6-speed manual, but people do get convertibles like this still with an automatic transmission, so I will show you guys what it's like to drive this car with the automatic. Now, in terms of the interior of this vehicle, this is a pretty inexpensive roadster, so the materials quality is decent. This is kind of like what compact cars were about 5-10 years ago, but the dashboard's all hard touch plastic. The grating itself feels okay. The piano black plastic here is a nice accent. It's all hard touch here again. This radio is Bose audio system that's part of the Grand Touring package. I'm utterly disappointed with it. I'm a little ashamed. Bose should be ashamed to put their name on these speakers. They're very tinny sounding, and really, I mean, you can't really hear much, and you really have to crank the volume up loud, especially when you have the top down. The steering wheel, it's a pretty older design steering wheel. It's a very thin rim. It doesn't have a bolstering extension, kind of inexcusable in a car that's this much fun to drive. But the steering itself is excellent. I'll get into the driving dynamics on how the steering feels. I love the way the steering feels. Door panels, they are hard touch here, although they do feel a little rubberized, but it is leather stitched right here, especially right here where your elbows are going to rest. I do like the fact that my tester has this cocoa colored, or they call it spicy mocha, in terms of the seat colors. Now, in terms of technology features here, this car barely has Bluetooth. Bluetooth was part of the premium package. It wasn't even standard on the Grand Tourer. You have to option in that premium package to get the Bluetooth streaming audio. Or I'm sorry, it's just Bluetooth. It doesn't even have streaming audio. In terms of everything else, it has an aux port there, a power outlet, no USB. There's heated seats there, single zone automatic climate control. So in my honest opinion, I would honestly get this car with the cloth seats, take away the leather, take away the heated seats. You know, don't give me this fancy stuff. This is a very simple car. The only power option here is maybe the power windows and then the power top, but everything else is pretty basic in here. In terms of storage, the glove compartment is kind of small. I do like how this is padded right here where your elbows are going to rest. They did think of that at least. Pretty small cup holders. There's another storage compartment over there. And then to release your fuel thing, it's over there actually. This right here is a little wind deflector you can put up and down. I did notice it makes a pretty big difference on the highway. Again, I do like this combination of the gray exterior with the spicy mocha, interior, and for a roadster that's pretty cheap, pretty fun to drive. The interior is about what I expect, but I really do have a lot of high hopes for the next generation Mazda Miata. Now, for a convertible, don't expect a lot of cargo capacity, and that's basically the case. The tiny trunk is one of the big flaws for this car. You're looking at only about 5 cubic feet of space. You can see my camera equipment barely fits in there, and there's really not much room for much else. The Corvette that I showed you guys, that actually had 11 cubic feet of space. So, in terms of convertibles, this is on the smaller side. So if you're going to take this car on a weekend trip, make sure you pack lightly. So if you're wondering what's going on under the hood of the Miata, those of you who are hoping for extreme speed will be slightly disappointed. This is basically a tuned version of the MZR 2-liter 4-cylinder that you're going to find in the previous generation Mazda 3. This is not the Sky Active motor. It doesn't have direct injection. It's a pretty conventional motor, double overhead cams, 16 valves, variable valve timing. Mazda, of course, tuned it a little bit in the Miata. It has a different intake noise, a different exhaust. It sounds decently well. The numbers are 158 horsepower for this 6-speed automatic, 140 pound-feet of torque. Go for the manual transmission and you're looking at 167 horses, so you do take a hit in terms of performance in horsepower with the automatic transmission. Now, fuel economy is actually not very impressive on paper. It's rated at about 21 city, 28 highway. Premium gas is recommended for this engine for maximum performance. Now, thankfully, because it's a 4-cylinder, I have been able to do much better than the EPA numbers. And the engine, despite the unimpressive spec sheets, this car's pretty light. It's about 2,600 pounds, so performance is adequate. However, Mazda is, or there are rumors showing that Mazda will go a turbocharged route with the next generation model. It's supposed to be co-developed with Alfa Romeo, so I am very excited to see what Mazda plans to do for the next generation Miata. Until then, let's take a look at how the current generation drives. So for those of you who decide to purchase one of these few Miatas that will be produced before the next generation comes out, it really is like taking a time back in a time machine. This interior of this car, the driving dynamics, the way it feels like something that was built and engineered at least 10 years ago. Right down to the fact that when you first take off on the car, the door locks don't even automatically lock. Most new cars today do that feature. Mazda's Miata still does not. very fun to drive. However, I have to say, I'll get this out of the way, the automatic transmission is terrible. This car definitely slows down a lot when you go with the automatic. So do yourself a favor, learn how to drive a stick if you're gonna buy this car. Please, please don't get it with the automatic. It just doesn't have enough power for most enthusiasts. However, if you truly don't care, really you don't care, I guess just go ahead and do it with the automatic. Now, in terms of the driving dynamics of the Miata, the steering is amazing. That's the one thing about this car that still makes it fun to drive. The steering is just incredibly heavy and it gives you a lot of feedback. Was full throttle there, so you guys who are expecting this car to be blisteringly quick with the automatic will be very, very disappointed. Expect a 0 to 60 time close to 8 seconds, which is not bad for most people. However, with a car that looks like this, that's this fun to drive, it really needs the power. Go for the manual transmission. You're going to shave about 1.5 seconds off that. I've seen most around 6.5 seconds. I had a lot more fun driving that 5-speed manual Miata Sport. Now, corners is really where this car is at, and that's basically where you're going to go looking to drive. This is where that perfect 50-50 weight distribution just feels amazing. This car is just incredibly flat, incredibly secure. Even though it will do a little bit of oversteer when you go around corners quickly, the car just feels very neutral, very safe. Like, it gives you a lot of confidence, and that confidence is just exuded through the steering wheel. This thing has a conventional power steering, hydraulic power steering. The feedback is just unbelievable. It's been so long since I drove a car that this felt this alive. And it still feels that way, I'm glad to say. So I am very, very scared that the new one may be dumbed down a little bit, but I'm pretty confident Mazda will not do that. I mean, look at this thing. When you turn the wheel, the thing just changes directions with authority, and there's not much body lean to. This thing doesn't have a lot of weight to pull around, so it just feels incredibly fun. And, you know, with the top down, this is basically the way you want to drive a Miata. I had the top up a couple times when I was driving in the bad weather, and it just feels so claustrophobic, so cramped. Speaking of the interior, this thing does feel on the cramped side. I'm a pretty small guy, so it's actually a perfect fit for me. Those of you who are on the larger size, you won't be able to fit in this car right down to the seats. They are very, very narrow. They do hold you in place relatively well around these corners, but my gosh, this car is just cramped, low to the ground, and it's also not the most it's not the nicest daily driver. You know, a lot of people have said the Miata had a very nice ride. I even said that, I think, in my 2012 review of that 5-speed manual Sport. However, I've had this car for a little over a week now, and the ride quality is not very good. It's very stiff, it's very loud, even with the top up. There's lots of road noise that creeps in. So this is your toy car. Do not expect to drive this thing really on an everyday basis. That Corvette I had, you could drive that every day, although you will be getting tons of stairs, but it's got a more comfortable and quieter interior. It's just what you pay for double the money. It's basically, you get what you pay for. But this is, as a toy track car, this thing still excels a lot. Now, the automatic transmission does have paddle shifters, which work decently well. They rev match on your downshifts. However, again, as an automatic transmission, it gets the job done. For a car that's this sporty, I'm hoping the next generation will have a dual clutch or something that shifts much more quicker, that's a little bit more aggressive. This thing just really slows down this car a lot. It shouldn't slow down this car by that much, and it shows the age of the car by choosing the automatic, how much it really slows down the acceleration times. Now again, when you go on these off-ramps or on-ramps on the highway, this is basically where the car excels a lot. It's just incredibly fun, and you want to go faster. In fact, I'm getting really annoyed that everyone around here just wants to go slow. Imagine what the world would be like on the roads if everybody drove Miatas. Now you're probably wondering what it's like to drive on the highway. It's pretty loud. The Corvette was definitely a lot quieter, so those of you who don't like excessive noise, this is not the car that for you. You're going to want to drive with the top up, but even when the top's up, it's not very quiet, so keep that in mind if you guys are planning to use this thing on the highway all the time. And it is your only car. It's a toy car, it really is. Now surprisingly, the engine does have a pretty nice exhaust noise. It has a very nice deep burble for a 4-cylinder, so I'm pretty pleased how Mazda tune the exhaust note of this vehicle. However, I'm very excited to get my hands on the next generation model when they hopefully go for the turbo route. So coming up to the conclusion of this review, I have to say that the Mazda Miata is still a great track car. Now, the price of this thing is still pretty much in line. It's one of the cheapest cars you can buy that's this much fun, and it doesn't really have all that much competition. In terms of how much it's gonna cost you to run this thing, fuel economy is pretty impressive when you actually are driving in the real world. On paper, it's not. I've been actually averaging about 25 miles per gallon in city. On the highway I got was about 35. This thing has only a 12-gallon gas tank, so it's pretty cheap to run. It does recommend premium gas. I mean, you can do either or, just expect performance and economy to drop a little bit if you guys decide to put regular in this thing. Now when you're coming out to the price of this car, the Miata still starts at about $24,000, just under 25 for the base sport model. This particular one that I'm driving is basically the most expensive Miata you can buy. It stickers for $32,500, and that includes the $1,400 premium package that gives you the HID headlights, the push-button start. Honestly, at that point, to me, this car doesn't make sense to get it fully loaded like this. It's not really much of a grand touring car. It's not luxurious on the inside. It doesn't have any tech features. My recommendation, buy this car in the club trim, get it with the suspension upgrade package, the appearance package. Make this car a true driver's car. At that level, it's about $27,000, $28,000, and it represents a pretty good deal. In terms of competition, this car doesn't really have much. I mean, you could compare it to a Ford Mustang convertible, similar price range. The Mustang's more expensive, but bigger. You could also compare it to the Mini Cooper convertible, the Fiat 500 Cabriolet. The Honda CRZ could be a competitor. However, this thing really just is basically in a class of its own. Those other cars that I mentioned, they're front-wheel drive. All the rear-wheel drive competition, they are much bigger, much more expensive. So if you are looking for something this balanced, this composed, this much fun, and top-down cruising, the Miata is still pretty much in a class of its own. Those of you who are okay with the dated technology, the really old interior, the somewhat sluggish acceleration with the automatic transmission, it may be worth a look for you guys. However, if you want to wait for the next generation model, which will be coming out as a 2016, Mazda is planning to show us that all-new model on September 3rd later this year. Hope you guys have enjoyed my overview of this 2014 Mazda MX-5 Miata. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you all in the next review.